Welcome to Zeros and Ones, podcast about philosophy, ancient wisdom, and the meaning of life. Here is your host, Becka Thompson. All right. Hey, how are you doing? Welcome to my super terrific variety show of talking about life. My name is Becka Thompson, and I will be your host. We're back upstairs because it's too beautiful of a day. I have this whole beautiful setup in my basement, but who wants to be in the basement on a beautiful day? So this is, I was going to record something. Again, I'm talking through my book, The Biography of All Things, and today's topic was going to be physics. But I was reading through some comments on the last thing that I posted about in astronomy, and I was very grateful for the engagement because it helps me understand, where are we headed next? What are people inspired to talk about? And I had to actually do some digging because someone left a comment that said, you lost me at 7 minutes. So I was like, okay, what happened at 7 minutes? And at 7 minutes into my last conversation about astronomy, I said it takes as much faith to believe in the science you've been told, in the models of the universe that we've been told, as it does to believe in the stories of the Bible. And clearly, my guess is somebody took umbrage with that, right? But so I wanted to actually unpack that because I stand by that because they're both incorrect. They're both incorrect, but they're both correct and incorrect at the same time. That is the nature of this contradiction that we call existence. Okay? So we're going to talk about physics because everything is one and everything leads back to this. But when people say things like, I believe science, right? As opposed to religion, those things have been categorized on purpose, right? To help, I feel like it's to obfuscate the world, but at a certain point in time, it was to help people understand, right? And actually, if you listened past the 7-minute mark, you'd realize that I was talking about what the Holy Roman Empire did to documents and did to science. And I very much want this entire podcast of philosophy to be helping people see their own way, okay? Because much like I can look at the sun from my window, you only see the sun if you choose to look. I was at the gym, the YMCA last night, and I was lamenting to myself how my muscles have gotten down, since I haven't been working out as much. And it's, you choose whether you're going to show up at the gym or not. You choose if you're going to be running. I have a lung condition now, which pisses me off, but it doesn't mean that it negates my ability to stand and walk, right? I'm choosing not to do that as much as I used to. The point in me saying it this way is that when people shut down, you're actually proving my point. So when someone says, oh, you lost me at 7 minutes and you quit listening off of something that challenged your worldview, what that's saying to me is you are making a deity of science. Because deity, again, I said this in the last episode, we need to define our terms. So the way I'm defining a deity is unable to be questioned, right? And I go back to the Richard Feynman quote, which I'm going to make sure I say it. So if you don't know who Richard Feynman is, he was a physicist, okay, who studied light, which we're going to talk about light in physics, and he passed away about 15 years ago. He worked at Cal Berkeley and among other places. And this is his quote: "I would rather have questions that cannot be answered than answers that cannot be questioned." This is a Nobel laureate scientist who I'm pretty sure if he didn't win, he was a finalist. I mean, it's so you don't have to take it from me. I've just studied this stuff. And I know for a fact that there's a disconnect because I've taught for so many years that a lot of people actually don't understand how or why or in what methodology we came up with these decisions. And when you go down a rabbit hole for actual centuries, not questioning how things began, it can be problematic. So, why would I claim that abject blind belief in science is the same as a religion? Well, first of all, blind belief in anything is a faith, period. The reason why I say this is because so few people understand what science is who claim to believe it. The same way, so few people understand the words of the Bible who claim to believe it. And I've gotten into this with religious people for many, many years. And now apparently, like, you know, scientists are mad. And I don't want to say, like, to me, this is not about, truth comes like a blade. Truth comes like a sword every time. And to speak the truth in love is what I tried to do. And ultimately, that's what we're defining both of those things, right? Quid est veritas? That's what Pontius Pilate asked Jesus, which we're going to talk about later in my book. What is truth? What is truth? We're going to talk about language, right? Where did that word come from? Truth. I don't know. So what we call science can build us tables, and it can take rockets to the outer stratosphere to go rescue astronauts, like Elon Musk did a couple weeks ago, and bringing the rocket back in. That is propulsion against the backdrop of the ether of what we want to call the atmosphere, right? And the reality is almost all of everything is based on optics. Optics is light, the same way the sun is shining into my house right now. I would not see you if I was blind. What does it mean to be blind? Okay, beyond the metaphor of being blind, right? What it means to be blind is that the receptors, your ocular light receptors, the part of the electromagnetic spectrum with which you have your visual cortex no longer works. But the part of the electromagnetic spectrum that I'm arguing is the biblical word of light. Let there be light. And the sound of your voice, and that light is all the electromagnetic spectrum, and that the receptors that are within your ear still work. If you go deaf, what has happened? It's that your receptor, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. If I go blind, it means that my eyes no longer have the receptivity of that particular frequency of the electromagnetic spectrum. But it does not mean it ceases to exist because you still see it. Are you with me? So existence is different than sight. And I mean that literally and metaphorically. So what is your faith in? Right? Now, both science and sacred texts. Okay, I want to be careful about the word religion because religion means to bind. Both science and sacred texts are meant to illuminate, figuratively and literally and metaphorically, our persons. And they both can do that. But you have to know what's actually going on. So when people say, I believe science, to me, when I see those posters, I believe science, I just think it's the same as somebody saying, I believe God. Because they're the exact same thing. God, Yod, 10. Like, it's all one. Okay. So we were talking about physics. We're going to talk about physics today. I think somebody's blowing outside and my microphone's picking it up. So I'm sorry. But again, like, I need a full studio. Look, listen here in the early years where I don't have my sound proofing. I used to when I lived in Los Angeles, you know, and it was like my friend had a studio in his garage. But that was like, now you can buy all that stuff on the TikTok shop for 50 cents. It's pretty incredible. So in physics and engineering, I wanted to talk about, we're talking about the stuff that makes up existence. Okay, that's what the physics is, but it, you know, if you remember, I believe it's Hamlet, throw physic to the dogs, right? It has this physical, right? It is dealing with the embodiment of stuff. Okay, because that word came out of this esoteric wisdom that already understood that was separate from the metaphysic, right? Which we're going to get to duality in our set 2, which we're not even near there. We haven't even gotten done with set 8 yet. So if you're just arriving, we're going through my book, chapter by chapter, It will be available hopefully soon, called One, the Biography of All Things. And the sets are following the inverse Fibonacci sequence. We'll talk about that another time. So the first set 8, which is what we're talking through right now, is are essentially the classical topics of education. So we've gone through ethics, arithmetic, which is numbers. We've gone through geometry, astronomy, and now we're on physics. Okay? And we started with ethics with the desire to just talk about, like, what are we even talking about? Because unless we have a framework of respectful dialogue, right, we're going to lose our way. And I would argue in our current tenor of people being completely unable to disagree with each other, and it's based in fear. I get that. And I don't care what side you're on. I have very much softened. Yes, I vote. Yes, I have opinions. But I have very much softened in my life because I just see how the rancor hurts people. And I know that I try my best to live my life, and this isn't about me, it's about all of us, but I try to live my life with reminding myself that everyone around me is a reflection of me. And, but the autonomy of my own person is getting to choose if I engage with that reflection of me or not. I guess I could put it that way. So physics and engineering, we're going to talk about density a little bit, okay? Archimedes invented a lot of really amazing things. If you don't know who Archimedes is, well, you clearly haven't seen Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, although that was really annoying to me. So we won't talk about that in a second. So the dropping of the apple is lore, okay? The physics of Isaac Newton. So let's talk about the way things work. Physical science at its essence is about force. I would argue force and density. So density, in a very broad definition, is how many things are in a set amount of space, right? So mathematics is all about the relationship of two variables, right? So density is the definition of things in a space. Now, what's incredible is when you take on, and I don't want to mess this up because when water freezes, the way the density of the frozen molecules, when they go still, they're actually lighter than liquid water, which we're going to talk about water a lot later, but that's a pretty incredible thing. So density helps make up mass, right? When I'm at the gym and I pick up a kettlebell, that's physically, it has less volume than like a volleyball at the same YMCA. But a kettlebell is a lot heavier, right? Because it's dense, and that makes up mass. Mass is different than weight. Weight is measured against our specific gravitational pull, and mass is eternal, according to physical definitions. Everything is about defining terms. Everything. And proof, which is what, some people took umbrage with, proof starts out with defining the terms before you can start the conversation. That's why we are defining our terms before we start having other guests on the podcast. Because I want you to know before we engage, where's this headed? What is important to all of us, right? So inside of density and force and mass is acceleration, okay? So F equals ma, force equals mass times acceleration. So if I stop short of hitting someone, right, and then just, do a little, in the Matrix, it's like, right, and it's supposed to be really hard if it's in the Karate Kid Part 2. You remember Mr. Miyagi being like, do you remember? Okay, it's very Gen X that I just said that. And cheers to my peeps. So we need to understand what those things are. Out of that, Newton got the idea for the calculus, okay? But inside of all these things is still a complete paradox. So sorry, I'm going over some of my notes to try to keep me on task, and yet at the same time, my brain is bouncing around reading these things, so maybe I should stop. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. You know that one, don't you? Come on. The Shining. Okay. So we want to talk about acceleration. So F equals ma. It's like I've got my little wooden coaster. Okay. If I drop this on my foot from like table height, it's not really going to hurt, right? Now I know for a fact, if I drop this from table height by accident and it lands directly on my foot, it'll actually break my toe. How do I know that? Because it happened to me earlier this summer. So there's a difference, right? Why? Why is the force different? Because of the mass, right? The acceleration would in theory be the same if it's dropped from the same height. Okay? So we understand these things, but what is the bigger of what's going on, right? What is it about density? We go back to frequency. Okay? So again, as we talked about a little bit with atomic theory, right? And atoms. P.S. A theory hasn't been proven. And yet we know something and it works because it works. This is why I always go back to math. I'll tell you plain. Physics is my second favorite subject after math. So when I was in college, I was studying to be an engineer, and I wanted to go off and see if I could be a performer, which I succeeded in doing, which is totally non-engineering. It's been, everybody in my life is always like, how did you do those two things? I'm like, it's just who I am. And I pulled up my transcript because I was like, I am not going to be an engineer. And I pulled up my transcript along with requirements to get their degree, and I realized I was in equal measure far away from mathematics or physics. Equal measure. And I chose math because math underscored physics, and I knew that I would ultimately kind of learn physics better and understand it better from math, because math is the ultimate rubric of philosophy, period. So there you go. And so when I talk about physics, I talk about it from a very mathematical standpoint, because you want to tease out the details, right? So what makes up the difference of density, right? Force equals mass times acceleration. Mass is the size of something in its density, right? That's how we get the mass. How dense is something in a prescribed space, right? The kettlebell versus the volleyball. So what is that? Well, as we talked about, atoms, atomic theory is that my entire body and your entire body and all these things are made up of atoms that if we could like matrix this, right, I could put my fingers right through the middle of this metal microphone, as you can hear me hitting it, in theory. Do you remember learning that when you're in a kid? When you're talking about atoms, and it's just the vibration of atoms if they're closer together or further apart. That's what makes the difference between actual space. If you're listening and not seeing me, I'm waving my arms around like a crazy person. And the density of the table. That's not going to go anywhere, right? But our bodies ourselves are part of that metric. So this is when it becomes difficult to see the forest for the trees. As they say, if you've lived your whole life in water, how would you know that you're wet? That is what our human experience is. So we have in science, there's matter and there's antimatter. What does that mean? It's like which came first, the chicken or the egg? Okay. So Rene Descartes, if you're just coming up to speed, Rene Descartes, mathematician, lawyer, philosopher, he's French, who wrote something called Discourse on Method. It's a philosophy mathematic book from about 1610. And he was part of the movement of the Enlightenment. He is why we have modern mapping. Rene Descartes, Cartesian, cartography, all comes from his name. He said, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. I might say it's sum ergo cogito, I am, therefore I think. But I would like to point out something that we talked about in arithmetic. Sum in Latin is I am. What do we call the answer when we add things together? The sum, or the sum. We're going to talk about language another day, but I know most people, because we are all told this, that homonyms are just are by accident. They're not an accident. Homonyms are not an accident anymore. So homonyms are nym, noun, nym, name, homo is same. So if it has the same sound, homonym, or even the same spelling, we're told that these words are not related, but they are. And it's the same as permutations in mathematics. But those are other things that we're going to talk about when we get to language. But permutations and combinations, which is a statistical form that we use to be able to encode everything that we download, everything that we upload, banking, right? Internet, Wi-Fi, our email address, right? Oh my gosh, how did you get into my phone, right? How did that cryptography, crypt, by the way, means hidden, right? Cryptography of the password. How did that exist? It exists these are the basics. I'm telling you how to build a house of cards. And I don't mean house of cards like it's going to fall over, although, everything ultimately falls over. I mean, it's like we're using the angular structures of the mind and the physic to get to where we are today. Okay. So if we think, therefore we are, what is the thing that we house our thinking in? Okay. Our brain. How does your brain work? So I would like to argue that everything is simpler than we've been told. Let me phrase that a different way. Everything is simpler than what I have been led to believe in my lifetime. Because I have been led to believe this, because I've discovered everything is simpler, I am making a little bit of a leap in presuming, yes, it's a presumption, and I know presuming makes an ass out of you and me, I get that. Presuming that you also have had a belief that things are more complicated than they are. They're not. So our nervous system, we're talking about physics in our brain. Our nervous system is based on what? For me to think something, I think, therefore I am, according to Descartes, although I think it's I am, therefore I think chicken, egg, right? Based on that, right now, if you're watching versus listening, or even if you're listening, what is allowing my voice to make sound? What is moving my hands? Well, you might say, oh, Becca, you've decided that. Okay, which you are you talking of? Which me? Which version of me? Okay, it starts as an impulse in the brain, right? It starts as an impulse in the brain. What fires? Okay, I am not a quadriplegic. If someone were a quadriplegic, what has happened to them that has not happened to me as of this present moment? What happens to the physical body that makes it that someone cannot move and sometimes cannot think or speak, but they can still think, they're still alive? What is it, right? If I break my neck and I sever my spinal column, my spinal cord, what does your spinal cord actually house? They are electrical impulses from your brain. That's how you feel things. Nerve endings are like an electrical wire. They are wires. So the same way I can wire my house to flick on a switch to get the light on, this is from when I was studying electrical engineering. You still remember a few things, right? Our bodies do the same thing. That's how I am able to move my hands and speak right now. And it is so automatic. But the beauty of children, the beauty of new to our earth people, which we call children, is that they're discovering it in real time. They'll stare at their hands, which I find children are a gift. They'll stare at their toes for hours and be like, bah, 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 because they're realizing they're making that happen. They're understanding their new machine. Bah, 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 bah. That's what babies do because they're discovering the world around them, and it's fascinating. So I'm able to speak because of electricity in my body. electromagnetic spectrum. This is the same thing that creates density and optics and light, which sound is light. Now, we always have to go back to Egypt. Always. When we talk about systems and physics. And I just kind of want to leave that there because we're already at kind of a time. It's almost 30 minutes. I don't want to give everything away. I mean, I don't know. These are my... The beautiful thing about being on the path of a philosophic pursuit of just wanting to understand, just purely understand. Not to get into the stumbling blocks of your family's belief system, your culture's belief system, the way you were raised's belief system, your country's belief system, your neighbor's belief system. Just you. Just a path of philosophy where you challenge everything you've ever been told or even read about, right? Is that the joy of that discovery for yourself, right? It's like following or finishing a marathon. I can explain to you what it feels like to me, but you'll only know if you do it. So there's no giving away anything. I'm telling you what I've discovered over the course of my life, over the course of my relentless pursuit for understanding, which is ongoing. Not that I've already attained all this, but I press on toward the goal. Who said that? Okay. So, I'll leave you with this question rooted in physics. Okay. So when we say we have our respiratory system, which mine got attacked through, I don't even know. I have hints, but I'm not positive. My lungs I have been diagnosed with pulmonary fibrosis, which they say has no known genesis, which I don't believe. I think it's particulates in the air, but it's very much affected my running. Let's look at the word respiratory, our respiratory system. What's the root? Okay. The root is spira, respiratory. Okay. Do you hear it? Spira as in spiral. Spiral as in spin, as in vortex, as in circle, right? So why would we call our breathing system, which is rooted in oxygen exchange, right? The trees to us, in a spiral, in spinning, right? Why did we root that word in the word spinning? And maybe you know this already, that the toilet flushes or vortex in the northern hemisphere is in the opposite direction of the southern. Okay, so nothing is separate. Nothing, not language, not physics, not science, not religion, not breathing, not drinking coffee, not you, not me. It's all one. We are all one. And I can't even get it out. Saying that aloud, it's true. We compartmentalize our world because we try to pull the world into good and evil. That's my spoiler. That's my takeaway from why we are so dogmatic. And I wish it weren't so, but whatever. But that is me editorializing. That's what I believe. That's the conclusion I've come to. Ergo, cogito ergo sum. I don't know enough Latin anymore, but it's the ergo. It's the ergo. Therefore, we are dogmatic. Because to recognize that all things are one, we have to recognize our own darkness and light, our own tensions. And that's challenging to do, no matter who you are. Yep. So, next time, we're going to talk about music, which, if I'm counting, ethics, arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, physics, music. I can't remember what else I have. It's in my book. I could look at the chapter titles. I don't want to. Let's see if I can come up with it in my brain. Music, rhetoric, it's language. I can't remember which the last one was. Let me see if I can find it. But definitely music is going to be logic. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So that's music, logic, and rhetoric. All the ICs pertaining to. IC means pertaining to. In Latin, it's the Latin suffix. We're gonna talk through all those, and that's set 8. and then we get into set 5 because we're doing the Fibonacci sequence in order. And in honor of George Cantor, we are talking about sets. All right. I appreciate your time, and I'm really grateful to all the people that listened to the last podcast. That was sort of a part 2 on astronomy. I think we're just going to leave physics at part 1 because I'm a little bit rambling while I have other things, charging and figuring that out. So best of luck to you, and I really appreciate you being here. Please, if you are curious about the rudimentary how-to of mathematics, I literally put up math videos every single day, because it's at this point, mathematics to me is like turning on the faucet or turning off the faucet or operating a motor vehicle. I just want to teach as many people as I can, and it's a language. So thank you again for tuning in. We're going to have some guests or talk about ethics. When I have guests, I don't think we're going to talk about the topics at hand of my book, but we'll talk about ethics more and what it means to have a philosophy. So thanks for tuning in. Until next time, folks, have a beautiful day. Thank you so much for listening to Zeros and Ones with Becka Thompson. Please subscribe and share.